Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. Just to give you a quick rundown of what we are here to do, we're going to provide information only on the proposed police station and fire station projects. First, we'll have representatives from Shive Hattery, which are our architects on the police station projects, and they will discuss the details of how we came to make the decisions that we've made so far. Then I'll speak on the fire station project, and again, same thing, how we've got to the point where we are now. Lastly, we'll have Michael Hart from Northland Securities talk about the financial impact of these projects if they were to be approved. And we'll have opportunities for questions throughout the way. So thank you, and with that, we'll get started.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Lewis with Shive Hattery. Thank you all so much for coming this evening. I'm going to share a little bit about what Shive Hattery's work was on this project and the analysis that we went through. Before I do, I would got a couple of team members here that I'd like them to introduce themselves and their participation in the project. Steve?
Steve Davis. I'm with Mike in the West Des Moines office. And, some of you, I don't know if anybody was at the last meeting, but I was at the last meeting to kind of do the presentation. So glad to be here to help and support what's going on.
Chris Nelson from town. Did a lot of the legwork as far as helping get the 3D model and things together you'll see later to kind of kick off the assessment.
So Shive Hattery was asked to get involved after the city had done some initial analysis on their own, just kind of looking at the existing condition of the building. We were asked to get involved to specifically evaluate the whole winery facility. So I'd like to just kind of dive into that just a little bit. So the existing facility need, the facility was not originally designed for the purpose of a law enforcement facility. The chief, and please help me with this specifically, but how long have you been in that facility?
I'm not sure exactly. There was a transition period beginning. It's been roughly 15 years.
15 years, and it was originally intended to be temporary, and temporary became permanent, at least for a 15-year period. There are a number of issues associated with the building, and we're going to kind of walk through that a little bit. But first of all, the square footage of the building is 1,400 square feet. You're going to see in Shive Hattery's material that we did an analysis with the chief and the city to look at what the appropriate size square footage is for all of the needs for the number of staff that are working in here. We're going to kind of get into that in a little bit. It's larger than 1,400 square feet of space. The garage facility space not being present for the patrol vehicles, the off-street parking issues associated with that. So if they're bringing an arrestee in, they're having to deal with that individual, there really isn't a good way to transition that person into the facility to make a determination. And it's all outside, and those things typically in a law enforcement facility are on the inside of the facility. So there's just some functional needs and deficiencies in the existing facility. ADA accessibility is a problem, and probably more than anything is the moisture control issues in the building. The evidentiary space in the lower level, you can see some pictures here of the existing condition that were prepared. That moisture gets into that area of the building in that basement space, it floods, it gets wet, and then that evidence gets damaged. And so they're really looking for a better long-term solution about how to handle and manage that evidence. Some roof leaks on this building, and it really kind of gets into the place of, should there be an investment into this building that we know is deficient in size, or should we look for another solution? Other things, crumbling plaster, aging mechanical systems in the building that really don't properly function well. So I suspect that there's a major maintenance component that's going to come to this building if this referendum were not to happen, you have to do some upgrades in there. That would be a consideration, but the question is for how long and why. So we've I've kind of hit on that. We're happy to dive into more questions in a little bit, but I'd like to get into the potential solution in our analysis. So the first thing that we did was look at comparables. We looked at other places that Shive-Hattery has worked that are listed up here on the board, and looked at essentially what is the appropriate functional need for size. We compared it to the other places that we worked in, other communities that we know that are comparable, and we arrived at a population projection for the number of staff. Now this population projection that you see here, this current population includes the prison, but we know ultimately, while that number says that that's there, we're not calculating our thoughts about the size and number of people with that. We're not including the prison population, we're taking it out. But that number does have that in it. So as we kind of went through our analysis and the need and the number of people, we had a conversation with the chief of the city about growth. What is the potential for growth? And growth isn't really driven by the number of people like some places we go. Growth is driven just by the services that you need to ultimately offer over time. How many sworn, certified people do you need to be able to properly serve the community as you're out providing law enforcement support to the community? So it's currently planned for 9. There isn't a big growth need, but we are accommodating in the design up to 12. And we think that's going to be more than sufficient for the long period of time. When you take in evidentiary processing, you take in the patrol riding area, you take in all of the associated things, the garage space, what we have found in these comparables and in our work is an average square footage that we see, which is around 550 square feet per staff person working in the building. And so we look at that 9 to 12 and we do that math and we come up with a projected square footage need of 6,500. Taking that baseline understanding and going forward, we then went in and started to talk about the actual spaces. The chief and the city gave us a sketched floor plan about the type of spaces that they needed, and we tested that against other elements in the building that we're accustomed to seeing. We came up with, based on the plan and the expectations, 7,600 square feet of space. That's a little bit over that target of 6,500. This was just a benchmark of the occupied space. The building, specifically the winery building, has a larger footprint than that. And I'm going to do a little explanation here in a moment around the cost to do this building solution compared to the cost to build it new separate somewhere else. But these are the targeted numbers that we studied. So as Chris had mentioned, we came in and did a building scan of the building because there wasn't any documentation on the building that we could rely on. And our scanning process gives us the ability to look deeply into the, I'll call it forensics of the building, looking at the structure, how the structure's configured, how it's built, how it's supported, what major maintenance-related issues there may be in the winery. And we were able to then take that scanning information and develop floor plan layouts of the building. So this is the existing condition here as it currently sits today, where you come in what used to be that front door and there was a little service area over here. I think it served as a little dining area or service area when the winery was active. This was kind of the front business end of that. And then at this wall right here, when you went back into the building, this is essentially the preparation area of that. There was a stair down to the basement in the lower level. of the facility, and then some garage space or service space in 2 locations around the functional preparation area of the building. The square footage takeoffs around that space were done to be able to take the targeted area. How large does the patrol report writing need to be? What sizes of offices do we expect it to be to serve the need? And then we took the square footage takeoffs to see how comparable it was in lining that up. That ultimately led to this layout and solution. And so what we have in the layout is we're taking that space that used to be up here on the public side of the building, we're going to turn that into a community room. So you come in the front door into a lobby, and then in this up front part, this area right here would be open to the public. The lobby in particular, and the community room and the public toilet for off-hour need, if a community needs to have a meeting similar to what we're doing here in this space. Or you want to have a training activity in the space where other law enforcement agencies in the area would come in. You could serve it as a community training room in there too. There are some display cases in here to just be able to display what the importance of Anamosa's police department over time. And then this red line is the security perimeter for the back of the house staff area from the public. So the public could come in, go up and walk into this reception counter here to a separation window, a secured separation window, be received, find out why their person is here, what assistance they need. They could wait in the lobby, or if educator wants to come in and get fingerprints done. Happens quite commonly. They would come back through this controlled door here, and there's a little seating area, and one of the law enforcement staff would come through the staff-only zone, come into this area, and the fingerprinting could occur with the individual that would need that fingerprinting done. There are a couple of interview rooms in here that are essentially lacking in the existing facility, and so there's 2 interview rooms in case you have 2 people that need to be interviewed at the same time, kept separate in these secure interview rooms. And then this viewing area is for the staff person to be able to come into that viewing area, and then there are one-way mirrored glass windows to be able to watch, record, and monitor each one of those interviews. The chief asked for the ability to have the public come back to his office space, and he could agree to respond to the public question that would come his way without going back into the business of the squad area, the detectives. And so there's a stair here that the public would have to come up to get into the chief's office and meet with the chief in this location. If it's an accessibility concern or condition with somebody who comes in, the chief would come down and meet them at this accessible level, either in one of these interview viewing rooms or come into the community room.
Speaking of, real quickly, accessibility, at the last meeting, somebody had asked, the existing facility doesn't have accessibility to the front door. How are you going to do that? You'll notice there is an exterior ramp that's being added. It shows up in one of the renderings we have later, but so that you do have accessibility for the public.
The whole building is accessible. The public on this side accessible by that ramp, as Steve just described. For the law enforcement people, there's a side drive here that comes back to this enclosed vehicular sally port, a place for that patrol vehicle to bring somebody in. And then there is an internal ramp that we're going to put in, internal ramp to come up that gets to the accessible level for the law enforcement space.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I guess I have 2. Fingerprinting, is that for like when they're arrested, I'm assuming? No?
No, the fingerprinting for somebody being arrested is going to happen back in the staff-only area.
Okay.
So this is just a fingerprint station for the public who comes in for that.
Okay, so right now, currently, if someone's arrested, they go up to the sheriff's area, right?
Yes.
So aren't they still gonna go up to the sheriff's area?
No, so the purpose, we frequently, what we have is people, for employment reasons, background checks, things of that nature, they'll wanna come in and, can do it at most law enforcement agencies, but they'll come in to have their, official fingerprints taken.
Right.
Right now, we have a little portable box, we just carry, depending on your height, because the front counter there, if you've ever been in the police department, is fairly tall, it doesn't work well for some people, so we'll have to either put it at a different table or move it around for accessibility purposes.
Cause we got a portable one at my work, cause we do fingerprinting all the time.
Yeah, so this,
And it's just on wheels, but my question was, cause we're talking about also fingerprinting people that we're arresting?
no.
Never, so there won't be 2 fingerprinting stations in this thing?
So let me be clear. This is not to replace the jail, the Jones County Jail, that the
Okay.
Jones County Jail needs. This is to allow, from a law enforcement perspective, somebody who's being interviewed so you can make a determination if you need to take them to the jail.
Okay.
So if that helps, I hope that helps.
Yeah, I was confused about all the fingerprinting areas.
It's mainly just, it's the background check is the primary purpose of that.
Okay, thanks.
In the staff area of the space, there is an open office configuration squad room for the patrol staff to do their report writing in this area, the secured file room. So let me just kind of step back though. From the vehicular Sallyport standpoint, with the law enforcement officer coming in, you would come in, there's a common break area there to come in, have the report writing area. There is a sergeant's office and a future office to accommodate that little bit of growth. These walls that are here, these walls are existing walls, and so we're taking advantage of the existing space and utilizing that. So it just coincidentally, we felt like we needed a future office, and that room already exists. We're gonna reconfigure the position of the door on the front in the existing wall. But we're taking advantage of the existing configuration of the space to the fullest degree possible. A staff toilet back here off the break room area. In that space, equipment and uniform storage, computer supply storage, and then in this open volume right now, we're gonna come in and construct an evidentiary processing space for the evidence that the law enforcement side of the facility needs. There is a shaft in the building right now. If I can properly find it. Not really showing up there, but I'll go back to the plan. There is a shaft right here in the building that goes down to that basement level. And since it already exists, it's just a little, an area that goes down. They must have been moving some of the vats or containers into that lower level when it had a winery purpose. And so we're going to enclose that shaft so that that can be utilized to take evidence down to that lower level for long-term evidence storage someday if needed. Right now, because of the size of the building, we have the ability to accommodate all the needs on this level, but the basement exists. The basement will also include the mechanical, electrical rooms for the space going forward.
Important to note too, with mechanical, electrical being down there and it's not being an occupiable space, this time we don't have to have ADA accessibility or a second exit out because it's just, but in the future then, if we add that, take the elevator down, then we'd add in a second exit.
Locker space for the training and support area, so that the law enforcement can have a training space for their needs in that respect. On the exterior of the building, there are a couple elements on the building. There's some windows that we will be removing. There, you see the red X's on this drawing. There is an element here that is a stair currently that goes down to the lower level of the building that does not meet the proper requirements for the stair. So because it's basically inappropriately designed or constructed, we're just going to tear it off when we don't need it. And there would be a lot of money to go in to upgrade it to make it work. And so we're just going to take that element off the building and come back in and put some windows back in on the side of the building that serves it. On the front of the building, the windows need to be replaced. That's one of the predominant things that we would be doing, is just upgrading those windows. And then there is just some cosmetic things that we'll do on the building. The building just needs to have a new exterior finish coat put on it, paint and a cementitious scratch coat put on the building. And then we would get some signage on the building. So from an exterior standpoint, it's really pretty minimal. It's mostly an interior project to reconfigure the space. The roof is in excellent condition on the building in its current form, and so we see that to be just going forward just fine. So here's a rendering of the appearance of the building, just kind of showing it from the corner. There would be the signage, some public parking out front, law enforcement parking along the side with the access into the garage, and a couple of the new windows. In order to get that security element to work with the reception area, we just have to put this little enclosure in there, because when you step up, there's a headroom issue there. We just have to put a little bump out on the building to make that headroom work and get the security properly handled. So that's just a little bit of overview with the design solution. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about the costs. The cost to do the work. The city had put together this worksheet on projects that they had identified, Mount Pleasant, Burlington, and Grinnell. What happens in comparable solutions in a renovation component? And the average cost to renovate a building based on these three examples, the average cost was $148 a square foot. I took the most recent one and applied a increase to that on what it would cost today on a per square foot basis. Construction inflation, historically in Iowa for the last 15 years, on average, has been 4% per year for the last 15 years. In 2008, when there was a recession in play, and many of us may remember, that inflation dropped down to 1.5% construction inflation. Recently, we've been experiencing 6% construction inflation per year because of all of the growth that's happening in the economy. But for the purposes, we average it out, some highs and lows, and average it out in 4%. So when we see these numbers here, that's what it took to build that project in 2018. Today, that would be $242 a square foot. We took all of the spaces in our understanding of the building. The structure is in excellent shape. As I said, the roof is in excellent shape. The mechanical and electrical systems are not. We have to do a full replacement on mechanical electrical in the building. The floor of the building has a little bit of slope to it. It's adequate to carry what we call a little skim coat. So we would come in and put a leveling slab on top of the floor that's there to get it level. Just a couple little nuances of what's built into that. And so the base cost to do the work on the project on the building is $1.2 million. The site work improvements at $105,000 to come in and the step coming into the building, getting the drive resurfaces on the side, just some of the minor site work improvements at $105,000. We put a contingency into the project because we know what we know at this point, but it hasn't been completely designed. We're not going to finish the design until the public says that they want the project to go forward, until this vote were to occur. And so for those future decisions that we know we still need to make based on our experience, we put a 15% contingency in there. That's $200,000. When we get through the design process and it goes out to bid, if we don't have to spend all that money, we won't encumber that. And so it's there to give us room on things we don't know today that we potentially will find out. But that's one area where the overall cost of the project could come down slightly. To put the furniture, fixtures, and equipment in the building that have been identified, $95,000. So the total cost to construct the building, do the site, and equip the building is $1.625 million. That's $182 a square foot, just about 183 rounded up. Compare that to the other renovation examples that I mentioned a moment ago, $242. This project, for the things that we know need to happen here, really is a good comparable. We look at it and say, this is an excellent building opportunity to get you the square foot you need at a reasonable price. Land acquisition that Jacob has given us for the cost to acquire the land is in here at $245. There is the fees for the design firm to complete the work, some contingency in here during construction for potential changes that may occur, and the other administrative costs to pay bond counsel, to print the bid documents, some miscellaneous things that come along with completing the work. So the total average cost that we have is $2,125,000. There is some market fluctuation going on in the market. I mean, when we actually go out to bid, maybe slightly higher and slightly lower. And so when we presented this to the council, their request of us or suggestion was to take the high-end number just in case.
I could talk about the design.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, what is that cost per square foot then? Because it's only totaled for the 1.6. What's the cost per square foot for the 22?
With the
Give me
hard
just a
soft
second,
ones.
I'll tell you.
While he's looking it up, I wanted Mike to talk about the design contingency is in. The construction contingency, that's recommended by the industry at 5%, which Shy Battery has had experience applying that, typically lower that once we actually get a project done. We put in the industry average right now. Again, with it being an existing building, we've done some, the surveying stuff, and once you open up walls and stuff, things that could come up we don't know, put it in.
The total cost per square foot for everything, soft costs and hard construction costs, is $263. The $242 was just for the construction cost, so that number also would have had other costs that aren't in that.
But that was really 226 in one.
226 at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
242 today. So the 242 today is comparable to the 183. We were also asked the question about new construction. Well, what are the other alternatives? If you didn't go into the winery building, what else should be considered here? So the cost for new, whoops, sorry, I flipped it and meant to hit the pointer. Pleasant Hill, Panora, and DeWitt all recently did on the time frame that's up here. Pleasant Hill is just getting finished or just in design, so it doesn't have a completion date. Panora was 12 and DeWitt was 16, but on Pleasant Hill, we know what their costs to construct are, even though it's not finished. So the average cost was $248. I took the recent one because the smaller the building based on the complexity, the higher the cost. The complexities that go into a law enforcement facility. So I took the 5310. I'm sorry, I meant to say 8840 because that's virtually the same size, and that's 316. Again, with the 4%, it would be $384 a square foot in today's dollars. So the purpose of that exercise is it good value to consider renovating this building versus building new? And we're at $183 a square foot compared to something that could be the $350, $380. We say, yes, it is, and our advice to the council and the chief is we think it's more than appropriate to look at this building, seriously look at this building. If we took the 8362 square foot that what we identified that the winery building is and said it was new, you'd be at $4 million. We're not advocating for that. We're just wanting it to be understood that we're talking about an increase of $1.8 million over what we're trying to do. If you go all the way back to the original conversation of, hey, we really only need the 6,000 and some change square foot solution, the 6,500, that's what you really only need. It just so happens the winery building is 8,300 square feet. If we looked at that and said, but let's only go build new what we only need, the 6,500, then you're looking at a 3.375 number compared to the 2.2 or a $1,125,000 increase. Again, all from our perspective, still makes sense to look at this winery building going forward based on its condition, the quality of the work, and what it's gonna cost to renovate it, to bring it in line with what the chief and the city needs.
What if you were to only build the 6,400, how much would that be?
That's just
the
numbers.
new- But isn't that the new?
If you own, oh, you mean in the
I mean-
existing building?
Yeah, so like if you did the existing building and we left almost 2,000 square feet not done, I'm curious what that number would be, because comparing new to rebuild isn't really,
Well, no, I mean, it's a fair question. If we just took the 83 to 6,500, we're talking about 1,800 square feet of space. There are some things in there that the $183 you still need regardless. So I'm gonna say, and I can get this number in greater detail, but just for the sake of the discussion, I'm gonna say that it's around $120 a square foot times 8,300.
I think the other
Off
thing-
of 65, so you're taking off 1,700 at 120.
so I guess I'm confused, and that's why I needed to explain to me. But I'm confused because it's costing us $260 a square foot to renovate it, but we're only gonna lose or we're only gonna take off $120 square foot
Well,
if we don't do it?
I'm
If you
I'm not
consider
trying to,
on the
I'm not
existing
trying to
building-
confuse you.
No, that's why I'm asking, I'm not arguing, I'm
I
just
appreciate the
asking.
question.
Yeah.
Again, the cost is $183 to construct. The other costs
Okay,
are other fees that, like buying the land. To buy the land
okay.
is still $245,000,
Mhm.
whether you finish out 6,500
Right.
or 8,300, it's still 245. So that's one of the other costs.
The
that
other
help?
thing is, if you only
Yeah.
finish out the 6,500, you're still putting in all new HVAC,
Mhm.
all new electrical, all the outside. So really, it's just some of the build out of some of those rooms. And a lot of those rooms are leaving as it is
Mhm.
and not building new walls. So there would be some savings, but it probably isn't an apples to apples.
So I, because the mechanical and electrical would remain, that's why I went from 183 to 120,
Okay.
because I know those costs have to remain
Right.
regardless.
Right,
And so,
yeah.
so I was just trying to give you that benchmark answer.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, because I was curious, because I was looking at the training room that they're talking about, and that's gonna probably take the LCC out of business if we put one in there. So I don't know if our town necessarily needs two fitness centers a mile apart from each other, so to speak. And that's why I was just asking, I'm
Well,
just kind of going through my head.
the specialized training that the law enforcement does is, and Chief, you can certainly address this if you'd like, but it has more to do with a tactical need that you're doing. It's not necessarily all fitness.
Yeah, so, this would actually be a completely different market segment. There's no, fitness equipment like you would find at the LCC or things of that nature. So
Okay.
for we refer to it as defensive tactics, but, you know, the defensive tactics skill sets that we use or practice, or the taser training, things of that nature, like right now, if we wanna fire off our tasers for our annual training we're required to do, if that falls in inclement weather, we have to find some place inside to do it, just little things like that, where we'd be able to hold in a larger training room
Sure.
such as that.
So we really don't see it as a duplication.
Okay, well, yeah, because that's why I was questioning it, because I know in Madison, you know, my dad was chief of police up there, and they always did it in police officers' houses, they did training, so that's why I was just curious, because,
Good question.
yeah, and we did.
Yeah, excellent.
Like, I'd sit there in the room and have to watch out for tasers, so, I was just kind of curious, yeah.
Well, that is, that's the overview of what we have today to discuss on the police facility side of this discussion.
I think at a high level too, and I shared this with the last group that was here. I know when this first came up and they were looking at, the city was looking at the building, Chris and I come over and kind of walk around it, poke into it, and I told Chris at the time, I said, I don't know, this might be like putting a square peg in a round hole. But the fact that we had the engineers come in and actually look at the conditions, look at what needed to be done, and put numbers to it, was pleasantly surprised, saying, you know what?
It proved out.
Yeah, it really proved out, so.
So I'd like to turn over the presentation. Chief, did you have something you would like to say at this point, or like?
If anybody has any questions, other than what's been asked, I can try to answer those, or, you saw the layout, if you have anything about that, I can go over that again, or answer any questions on that. Otherwise, I don't have anything specific at this point.
And I think there's a conversation on the fire side that we wanted to talk about next, is that correct?
Yeah,
Before we
as
get
long as
into the
no
finance?
other questions on the police.
Happy to answer any questions at any time. We're gonna stay and be here if something comes up here in a moment that you're thinking about. So, okay? Thank you so much.
That's
So we'll talk about the fire station project. Current facility, 5,360 square feet, with 6 truck bays. It's 45 feet in depth. That's the outside length, not necessarily the length inside. So why exactly do we need to do anything? It just comes down to space primarily in this project. This is kind of the main changing area for our volunteers, and that's just, without having tried it myself, I can tell it's a very tight space to try to get that gear on in a quick, short amount of time. Other thing is just difficulty with equipment. So this is a four-wheeled utility vehicle that they use on certain calls, and to get it out of the bays right now, you can kind of see in the corner of the picture, there's a truck sitting right in front of it. They've got to pull out, get the trailer pulled around, then load the vehicle on the trailer before they can leave. And all that takes a lot of time, whereas if they were able to have this stored on the trailer in the bay, it would be a much quicker response time for that piece of equipment. Just another example, not enough storage space, so I don't know when this was built, but just had a loft for additional storage and have, things stored underneath as well. Another trailer back there that I believe it's pulled with this truck, so that does help, but there's just nowhere else to store additional equipment if there was something needed. Current bay doors are 12 feet in height, which would not accommodate some of the newer model trucks, which we will talk about. But, again, right now it meets the current truck height, but eventually we'll be looking at buying a new truck, and if that particular model is 14 feet, then we're out of luck for storing it in the current facility. So the question was, we know what we need to do, where do we go with that? And the discussion was pretty short in terms of the current fire department really likes their current location. They're on the 4-lane highway, they're fairly central, and they can get to all parts of town and easily get outside of town for those rural fire calls as well. The building is overall in good condition, and the property itself has enough room for expansion. This is a rough outlay of the proposed footprint there, so you can see it fits all within that existing parcel.
And
and when we checked those boxes, there just didn't seem like any need to look at other sites for a full new station, but to look at this as an expansion project. So what are we planning? 7,440 square foot addition. That is, again, more space than the existing building has at this time. That would provide for 4 new truck bays, 14-foot height, 60-foot depth. So thinking back to that picture of the area to put on that bunker gear, if it were to be stored behind the trucks, I don't know if that would be the plan or not, but if it were, that would give them more space to put on the gear. And the 4 bays, we don't think that is an immediate need when we proposing this project. It just makes sense to build for long-term need. So, you know, I would think we expect this building to last at least for the needs of at least 20 years, if not longer. The project does include plumbing, HVAC, electrical, specifically stub-ins for bathrooms, but no interior walls, or the bathrooms won't be finished within the scope of this project, but we want to be prepared to do that in the future. So it'll basically just be this giant open area ready for to park trucks and equipment in for the time being. The space there in the corner, where obviously you wouldn't be able to park a truck, is where it's future use planned for a larger meeting area and bathrooms and other amenities that they may need. And that pretty much wraps up the design. So any questions on that? Yes?
Of course we. So, we're adding over 7,000 square feet, correct?
Correct.
Which is a good thing. But why is it that's only gonna cost 700,000 and for 8,000 square feet, you're wanting 2.2 million
This
for a
is a
police
sheet
station?
metal building with, I guess, very simple connections for the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. Because
Okay.
like a lot of the plumbing, in terms of water service, we already have it in the building, so it's just expanding that to the addition. The HVAC, again, we already have existing. We just need to make
Okay.
sure that we're able to provide it to this
And
addition.
how many firefighters are in there on an average? Do you know, Rob?
Could be someone else.
How, well, I'm not quite understanding.
Well, I'm-
Because we're not a full-time department.
Right. But like
So-
when you get calls, like how many people are in there?
Could be 20 of us.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Electrical, I think we
Jacob?
do. Yeah, just 'cause-
Jeremiah, tell her how bad it is when you try to put your gear on, you gotta go down and get a truck.
Oh, no, I'm totally in agreement with the fire. No,
He gets run over because he's way down the line.
Do you? No, I'm totally in agreement with the fire one. I think we totally need it. How many police officers do we have at a time in the police station?
It depends on the shift, there's usually an overlap, myself, the administrative assistant,
Sure.
and then 1 or 2 other officers during the day,
Okay,
2 to 3 at night.
okay, so we're talking 4 to 5 maximum at one time in the building?
Generally speaking, yeah.
Is it closed during lunch hour or whatever?
No, it's not, no. The way it's currently structured is, the administrative assistant, when she goes to lunch, we'll try to get somebody to watch the front desk. Just to staffing issues, that doesn't always happen. Officers can get called away or whatnot, and then they have to lock the doors and run out, go to calls or whatnot, and return.
So it will be accessible 24 hours if someone has to go in there, the new one?
So the front side of it will be accessible to the public. I haven't determined yet how we could, or if we could make it work to where they would be able to go in just that initial area for maybe a call, like a call button or something along those lines that's placed there. Some places, for example, you'd be able to walk in and press a button and it automatically dial the sheriff's office, the dispatcher takes calls or whatnot. So, I don't know if this is possible or not, just some things we've been thinking about.
And then I just have one more.
I do in the fire station too.
Yeah.
Why don't you just put the bathrooms in now and get it over with? You're building it, get the bathrooms done.
Um,
Why wait?
We possibly realistically could, depending on how the bids come in, for no more area than what it's gonna take up. Be a women's and a men's. They'll be handicap accessible. They're already gonna be stubbed in for plumbing and for sewer. So, like I said, depending on how the bids come in, it would probably be wise to finish them now,
Yeah,
so that they're done.
right,
So
because
the
you
rest of
don't
the
know
whole
what's gonna
building
happen down the
is
road.
usable, yes.
From a design perspective, you just have the designer put the information together and create a bid alternate, and you get a price back. And then as long as you can afford it within the number, it gets
Well,
done.
talk to me later, I know about the plumber.
And I don't know if this
He'll
is for
donate
this,
his time.
I don't know if this is for this, for right now, but I've heard a rumor that we're now bidding on both, that both are linked together. Is that true? Because I know with our initial meeting, 90% of everyone was for the fire department, but 90% probably were against the current offer for the police station. So now, if I understood correctly, and that's why I'm asking, because I'm hearing it through the grapevine, we're gonna end up, if we don't agree with the police station, we're screwing our fire department, because we have to bid all, it's all one or none? Is that correct?
The bond question, that'll be on the ballot has both projects together.
So how did that come about when it was two different proposals, and that's really screwing our city, because.
We decided, both projects were important, and that, we felt both needed to be supported together.
Are you doing that because, really because you didn't have the support for the police department, now you know that the whole town's really supportive of the fire station, so you're kind of forcing the issue with the police department?
We're doing it because we think it's best for the community.
So if it was best for the community, why wouldn't you leave them two votes? Because we're gonna vote. I mean, the community is supposed to choose.
And they will.
So the community can't
So,
choose when you put two
we're-
together.
Unless there's other questions about the fire station project, I wanna move into the next phase
Okay,
of
no,
the
that's fine.
presentation.
I just wanted to know if you guys were really being sneaky, and now I know you are, so that's fine.
Is
So
there additional land at the fire station after this addition's put on? That's already paid for, that the city already owns, that the fire, or the police department can go there? Then that property is paid for,
We
that's
had
not an
previously,
expense?
even people previously to me, they had looked into that option of locating a new police station on that property. We determined that for several reasons that was not a good choice. For cost, for one thing, the space is very limited. Let me go back. Additionally, there's now a trail that runs right along the property line here that would be really negatively impacted by trying to put a police station on that hillside. So it just didn't make sense. But anything else? If not, Michael Hart from Northland Security will talk more on the financials of the project.
All right. Again, Michael Hart from Northland Public Finance here. So the question that's on the ballot is one question for $2.9 million. The way that the question's written is that there's up to $2.2 million for the police station, up to $700,000 for the fire station. So when that bond is issued, this is simply setting a maximum amount that can be borrowed for the project. So if the need after the bids come in is 2.6 million instead of 2.9 for the combined projects together, the city council has the ability to borrow less than the $2.9 million. And so what we're showing in terms of number, we've tried to be conservative in terms of we're showing the maximum amount being borrowed. We have a estimate in there, an increase or a cushion in terms of interest rates. And since I ran these numbers, interest rates continue to go down. And so if we're actually locking the financing in today, the tax impact we would expect would certainly be no higher than what we're showing here, and could potentially be a little lower depending upon how the bid process works its way out. So there's approval would come through the bond vote next week on March 3rd, and it will take a 60% yes vote in order for the city council to be able to enter into the financing for the project. They should it have successful passage, the city council would move forward with the design process and work toward a construction bid, and those will be done by sealed bids through a competitive process for the construction process. So I did some calculations for what the tax impact might look like. Again, we're trying to be as fair here as we can and try to be a little bit on the conservative end of things. We have an average resident, 127,000. Residential property in the current year pays tax on 55% of the value. So that is about that $69,000 number. Here, about $70,000. And you take this $70,000 times $1.78 per thousand. That's the estimated tax increase that we're projecting here. It'd be $124 a year, or about $10 a month. Increase over what you're paying currently. In terms of where the city sits at the current point in time, it's got a pretty low debt position overall. There's only a small payment being made right now of about $75,000 with the debt service tax levy. That's what we're talking about here. And that debt is paid off in 2 more fiscal years. And so in terms of the overall financial picture of the city, it's pretty solid condition, and we're not overburdening the city by any means. And in fact, even after this debt, you compare yourself to a lot of other cities, you'd still be in a fairly low position in terms of overall outstanding debt. This chart on the right shows a little bit more detail of the assumptions that I've made. You can see the interest rate I have assumed here is 2.3%. That's about 0.5% above what the market conditions were when I ran these numbers a couple weeks ago. And so we'd be sub 2% today in terms of interest rate. It's frankly, this week is probably one of the best weeks in the history of time to be borrowing money. If you've been following the markets, when the stock market does bad, bond rates go down, and when you're borrowing money, it's a good thing. The bond term, this is assuming that this will be completely paid off in 10 years' time. So the city has the authority to go out to 20 years. That would lower the payments. It would add a little bit more interest expense through that time. But this will be completely paid off in 10 years under this tax impact proposal. So there's some detail here in terms of different property values, what that tax impact might look like. If you take a residential property versus like a commercial property, commercial properties pay tax on 90% of their value instead of the 55% that we showed here for a residential property. That's the way that the state property tax system is constructed. So I'd be happy to take questions about this. It's a general obligation bond issue that is ultimately supported and planned to be paid for with a property tax levy. So
I'd just like to add that, cost is very serious to us. We want to try to do this with as little as we can. So given that our good debt situation, when we were looking at the different lengths of borrowing, compared to a 15-year term, we're saving $275,000 by paying it off in 10 years. So while the cost per month or per year would be lower, overall the cost is much better for the city and for the residents by going with the 10-year option.
I think that's all we have there. Are there any questions on the dollars and cents piece here? All right.
All right, well, thank you, everyone, for coming out. We appreciate it, and again, the vote is on March 3rd, so.
What are the times for the voting?
6
Is it
to 9?
6 to 9?
I think so. Courthouse.
Yes.
Jacob, I'd make a couple points. I travel over the state of Iowa, working with cities. And I didn't have any preconceived notions of what this looks like, but this, to me, comes across as a very good plan. There are cities out there that build brand new police stations and brand new fire stations, and they're paying a lot more for them and a lot more taxes. And we've never had a police police station in this town that was built as a police station. They've been the stepchild at City Hall, they've been the stepchild at the old library building. And, you know, I don't wanna pay more taxes either, but there comes a point where you gotta say, this generation has to bite the bullet and pay for these facilities, because you think about it, in order to run a good police department, you need good people, good officers, you need good equipment, good cars, and you need a facility. Well, we got good officers and we got good vehicles, but we don't have a good facility. And also keep in mind, do you wanna be a police officer in this day and age? I don't, because of what they're going through. God bless them, I'm thankful we've got police officers in this town. And I can tell you, 30 years ago, we'd had all kinds of people want to be police officers. But I travel the state now, and my chiefs are telling me, I talk to, they're having one heck of a time finding officers. This facility might help us recruit and retain the people we got. Because if we don't have a good place for them to work, why would they want to be a police officer? They can go anywhere else and be a police officer. So I'm really telling you, you need to talk to your neighbors and your friends and tell them to support this, because you may not have a police office, a police department 5 or 10 years from now if we don't provide the facility for us.
I don't think there's been a problem supporting it. I think it's a problem supporting this particular spot. Because the price got hiked up, we were told 700,000, and now it's all of a sudden up to 2.2. And the fact that it's gone shady puts a real big fight between the citizens and the police force, because 90% of people were supporting our fire department. And I want to support our fire department, and I want to support our police station, but not with this building. And now we're being screwed. And to me, if you're in a community and you're trying to bring people in and make this all kumbaya, that's not the way to do it. And so I agree with supporting that they need something. I've talked to the chief about it before too. Absolutely. But not 2.2 million for 4 officers at a time. I lived in a 900 square foot house and raised 6 people 24/7 and had 20 animals in the house. You can do it. So it isn't the fact of not supporting the police force. I totally 100% want to support our police force, and they totally need something different. But this was the wrong way to do it, and to me, this just bit us.
If not this, then what?
There's been an offer from somebody else for $100,000 place. There's been several, and what was the other one? There was another one that was really good. We've had several offers. And it just stuck to this one, and this one is now costing so much more than what we were told. So there has to be an option, but the
I think
problem
one of the
is we
options
don't
you-
have an option now.
I think one of the options you talked about is the lot that's right behind the existing fire station, is that right?
I was told,
The house you mean? That is one of them.
Behind
that's
the
one
fire
of them.
station?
Because it's for sale, I mean, the
But-
price is $120,000, but now you're talking about demolishing a building,
Right.
removing all those trees. By the time your site costs, you're gonna pay the same amount, $250,000, for a blank lot instead of a commercial building in good shape. I don't see the logic there.
Well, I don't see quite the logic in going from 700,000 to 2.2 million. And I don't see the logic in combining these and screwing all of our citizens into being forced. Because to me now it's a forced thing. We're not given our freedom to support our police officers on our own. We're not. It's been taken away from us. And we have to screw our fire department, which is wrong, to stand up for our rights.
If I may, there was a solicitation to design firms like Shive Hattery about coming in and looking at a $700,000 solution in the building. It was a number that, at least from my perspective, that we saw, that was a number that was put out there as a target. The request of us was to go in and look at it and figure out what it would actually take, which is what we did. So I don't feel challenged about what we did.
No, not at all.
I'm simply trying to communicate that $700,000 was an additional number that needed some professional, any architect coming in, evaluating that, to come in and make a determination, what was it really gonna take?
Yeah,
And so there was a number, and I understand that was out there.
Yeah.
It wasn't realistic.
Right.
So,
It was just, that's what we were told, and I think, and it's it may come down to where the police station does need the 2.2 million. But the fact that the choice has been taken away from us really puts a barrier for me against my city people. I don't trust you. I love the chief, and I don't trust him now. You took that trust away. I'm just being honest. I'm being honest.
If I may.
I will speak my mind anytime.
So.
I'm moving over here.
I just don't trust him now. It doesn't mean I don't care, it doesn't mean I don't support it.
So I have a question actually for that. So even if we want to, right now, as it sits, if we want to separate, and we actually cannot, is that true because of the petition that was signed that brought them together no matter what at this time? So even if we want to separate, we can't. Is that right?
What petition?
There was a petition that required both projects to
Oh.
go to a vote.
Okay. So don't be mad at him for not being able to separate them. Be mad at that petition that didn't write it the right way. And
Yeah,
now they're
that could
stuck
be.
together because of that petition, and that's why people are pissed.
It wouldn't have to
Yeah.
go
They
to
didn't
public
write the
vote.
petition the right way, they just went, I want to petition this,
And
and it did the whole thing.
that's
Well, and
where
I
the-
don't know who to be mad at, and I'm not really
Well,
mad, I'm
you're-
just
you're
frustrated.
mad
I think
because
that
your
there's a
frustration
trust
now-
issue.
Right, but
Yeah.
that trust issue is not on the city, because the city was originally doing it because it's lower cost for the bonding issue, and then even if they wanted to now, they can't separate it. So they can't even tell you, yeah, we can separate it, because they were bonded together now because of the petition.
Also,
Got it.
I've been out in public and I've heard people that say, I'd be totally in support of the police station if we go out and we spend $4 million. So people are okay with $4 million, but you're not okay with 2.2.
I haven't
Personally,
heard that.
I don't pay taxes in the city. I pay county taxes.
Yeah,
I use the fire department, so I don't get to vote on this issue and I don't like that.
yeah.
I would
Yeah.
love
I
to
think
vote
the
for it
county
because
people
I
should
think
be
that this
able
community
to.
needs this. I think they need
It
both.
stinks.
I think they do need both too. I just don't know if this is the
But
right
why
way
would
to
you
go.
wanna spend more? And from
I
a
don't wanna
business,
spend more.
from a business, if you're thinking business,
Mhm.
two separate loans, you're paying two separate interest rates. So lumping them together brings your interest rate to 1 versus 2. So do you wanna
Correct.
pay interest on 2 loans or do you wanna pay interest on 1?
It depends, because if you have a $800,000 loan and a $700,000 loan, that's a lot cheaper than 2.9 million.
And I believe the
So-
$700,000 actually came out, and that was just an estimate. I believe the city was like, hey, this is what we can actually spend without having it to go to a special election. So therefore, they were going, hey, we can start a project and do it piece by piece. So that 700,000 was just to do a piece of it, not to do the whole building, because that's just not realistic.
Well, and I know that's not realistic,
So-
but that's what we were told at the first
Right,
meeting.
and-
We
and obviously,
specifically
yes,
asked, is that
right.
the most?
That is the most they could have borrowed at that time.
Yeah.
But because of the request to have an actual cost done on the building to get completely done,
Yeah.
now that's where you get the 2.2. The
And I'm
700
not
was
saying
just-
that that's not
just to do a little
necessarily
bit of it.
needed, but I just think it's,
So I mean, the 700,000 kind of went out the window as soon as the public started asking, what are your actual figures to finish this building? When you want a whole finished building, of course, it's not gonna be 700,000. So if you want to stay with that, we should have just went, hey, what section of building is this actually gonna finish? And then what's it gonna cost and how many more times are we gonna have to do this? Instead, the city went ahead and went, hey, it's actually gonna cost 2.2 million to get the whole building up to code and actually usable. So therefore, yeah, the 750, or the 700 was originally done. That
Yeah.
wasn't for the full project, and never was it sent for the whole project either.
And there's some savings of combining bond issues, because you're using the bonding attorney once instead
Right.
of twice.
No, I
And-
get that.
And financial advisor, you're using once instead of twice. So,
Mhm.
although it's not a lot of money, you are still saving by combining it into one bond issue.
no, and I totally agree with that, and I understand that. I just think, when this all started, we were all told, I mean, I was at the very first meeting, been at a couple of them, we were told that these were separate. We did a huge city thing, we had, I don't even know how many people, you were there, and everybody had separated, and we discussed the pros and the cons to everything. From that one on, it was separated. I don't know nothing about a petition, but,
Just to fact check that real quick, that's not an accurate timetable. That meeting happened as a result of the petition. At that point in time, they were together. The public.
they were,
Yes, the public's, at that meeting.
okay,
the
cause that
general-
I didn't know.
At that meeting, the general consensus of everybody there was that they would prefer that they were not together, but that is not the way it was. They were currently together at that time. So in going
Well,
around
that's
and
good to know.
in going around and talking to folks, they were expressing that would rather they be separate, but they weren't.
Okay, cause the way we were voting there, we voted them separate.
Well, that was a
It was-
brainstorming session, not a
Okay,
vote.
yeah, cause we were doing like fire department, police department.
Yes, which
And-
they have always been
Right,
two separate discussions as far as what the fire department
Right.
is doing and what the police department is doing. Obviously, needs are different for both facilities, so,
Right.
so they are somewhat independent in that aspect. But at that time, the discussion was, proceeding forward with both projects, on this referendum, which the petition was filed for against, and so they were together at that time.
well, that makes me feel a little bit better because I didn't hear about that until afterwards, and I just started hearing about it a month ago that they were combined. And then we heard about the water department started adding charges, and it's like, oh my gosh. All of a sudden, the water department's adding charges, there's more people getting pulled over and getting tickets. Which, I mean, it is what it is. But I mean, it's just like, all of a sudden, it was like all this money, and then I heard that they were combined now, and I hadn't known that before, so I thought it was pretty shady. But if it was already like that, then that's not so shady, so see, now I can like you better again. But, I mean, but it's just, you know.
I was not part of those discussions I don't know what happened on all those discussions, all those meetings, but the bottom line is, we need both facilities.
I agree, we
Bottom
need
line.
both facilities.
Also, the bottom line is, the proposal I think you see here tonight is probably the better of all the options that I think they've explored. And the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, we've elected these folks to make these decisions for us. You know, our city council and mayor, we've elected them to make that decision. Any one of us in this room could have ran for office, probably, and been in those positions. So I'm thankful we got 7 people that stepped up to the plate and are willing to take these positions and make these tough decisions. And when they go through the process of bringing in the experts and telling you this is the way to go, then I'm gonna support my mayor and council and say, yes, let's get this done for us and the next generation. Because most of these things are not just for us, they're for generations to come. So let's do our kids and our future generations a favor and get behind something like this.
When do you get to move in? Like, how long will it take?
That is a question I don't know the answer to.
Want to take it?
Go for it.
So the design process that we will go through once the approval is made will take us 3 months to produce the design and send it out for bid. So we're looking at, let's just say June.
Okay.
And then the construction process on the work, to complete the work, is 8 to 9 months. So we're gonna say a year.
So that's not bad.
A year to have the police station ready to go. I'm not as familiar with the fire station timeline, somebody else would have to address that.
Well, the
But
fire station, at least they still have their building.
I would
that's
assume
what I
it
was-
could easily, in my opinion, fall within that window.
I think a similar timeline, worst, I mean, we would shoot for trying to get a fall construction, but worst case scenario, spring construction, so.
Well, I would like to hope for spring, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think no more than 6 months, 7 months to complete that building.
From the police facilities perspective, since the bulk of the work is interior work, it worked
Right.
throughout the winter
Yeah.
to get it done.
Weather's no problem on that, but starting from scratch sometimes, it does become a problem.
Yeah. Okay. At least I don't feel you're so shady now. I was really gonna have a discussion with you after this.
Well, I do appreciate that, but you are absolutely welcome to have a discussion with me at any time.
Oh, I know.
I definitely have an open door policy, and you're free to come in at any point in time and talk to me, so
Yeah.
I can make arrangements if that doesn't work for you otherwise, so.
I'd like to touch on one thing that Tim mentioned and Jacob. You know, we're looking not tomorrow, 25 to 30 years down the road.
Right.
We anticipate full-time firefighters here shortly.
That would be good.
Just because of the way things are going by the state and everything else.
Mhm.
So with our addition, there will be room to incorporate sleeping quarters for those individuals on staff at that time.
That would be good.
So, like I said, we're not looking for tomorrow, we're looking, as he said, probably his grandkids.
Right, well, and like I said, I have not heard one person ever that disagreed with the fire department. I mean, I think that's really had all the support. I think there's been questions with the police department because of the facility, the how big it is, the location. I mean, obviously, there's more, I don't know, controversy with the police, just in natural.
When the city
Natural.
initially began to kick this off, they had identified roughly 10 to 12 locations within the community. And, you know, there was a kind of factored in on maybe in and around downtown. So they made a list, and then it just seemed like with every contact, scratch this.
I remember that.
And, you know, whether the individuals decided they didn't want to sell, the price point was way out there, or it just began not to fit the need at the time. But, you know, if there was 10, 9 out of the 10 fell back to the current property owner not being able to come to an agreement. So early on, the city did, you know, a lot of work that went on behind the scenes, just unseen.
Yeah.
Through that process, as we began to eliminate, getting down to not very many, this building we were approached by. Now, granted, you know, looking back, if the city would have identified that building at that time, we probably could have made some type of offer to the financial institution that was holding it,
Right.
and possibly able to buy it at or around where the
The
current.
70,000.
Yes, okay,
Right.
but that is not what the financial institution was asking. They were around, if I'm not mistaken, at 150,000, 170,000 for it. So
But they got it.
the negotiation between the two got it for 70. Good for them.
Yeah.
That's what we would all like to be able to do.
So now we're having to pay for 245, which isn't as big of a deal to me
But
anymore now
that's-
that we're at
that
2.2
is
million,
the
but it was
value.
before.
That is the value of that structure.
With
But
the
they
new
haven't
roof.
done
You
anything.
put a new roof on it.
$100,000 new roof was put on,
Yeah.
105,000.
Well, that would be retail cost, he owns the construction company.
No,
So there's
no,
We
no.
didn't put that on.
He didn't put the roof on.
He didn't
That was
put the
done
roof
by
on?
an outside construction.
He does
company.
pipe work, he doesn't do roofing.
No, it doesn't do roofing. He just does on the ground.
Also, a good clarification point, we don't currently own that facility, so while we are in an agreement,
But we will own it.
we have the ability to back out if this bond is not approved as a term of our purchase agreement.
But
So-
if we okay the 2.2 million.
Yes.
You would own it, right?
Yes. Correct.
So nobody's gonna make rent on it?
No.
Okay.
So, you know, take
Yeah.
that 245 and subtract the $105,000 roof, leaves you with 140,000, you're buying that structure. So, and, you know, he bought it at 70, he made some, he had all the cleaning on the inside to do. So, I'm not saying he didn't make money, but isn't that called enterprise?
Well, yeah, everyone's gotta make money.
Business
I
is
just thought it
enterprise.
was like,
In reality, the 245, check around, I don't know if you find a more structured building in town than that.
no, I
These
agree.
guys
I
would
mean,
know a lot more about it
yeah.
than I am.
No, I
And I just
agree.
wanted to
It's
address
worth
the
it.
700,000.
Yeah.
That, yes, that was a target point, and I'll own this. I swung for the fence at $700,000 and struck out. I missed the
did?
mark. I was part of the council at the
Oh.
time that thought, we can do this for $700,000. And you know what? We were off, and I'll own that part of it. But I am not in the experts like they are.
Right.
Now, they wanna challenge me on manufacturing equipment and the cost of it.
I wouldn't
bet I'll
want to
be
do
down.
that. I'm not going
So,
there.
I'm just trying to, you know, and
Well, that's
listening
good
to
to
what
know,
you hear on the
because-
street,
right.
it's not, you know, it's like the internet.
Right.
Because you see it there, don't make it true.
And that's why I was so mad and I came in,
Oh,
because I'm
you
like,
were
are
mad,
you
yes.
kidding me? Like, all of a sudden, you're gonna put them two together, and I did, I thought it was like, that's just a bunch of BS that
There,
we're getting
and at
screwed
the
like.
time, we
So-
the city, we the
Yeah.
elected council, you know, they're projects that the city needs.
I agree.
Just combine them and put them out there under one referendum, you know, like Pat said, you know, we were looking to trim down as much as we, out-of-pocket expenses we could. Combining them was, what we felt was the best thing. There again, we'll swing for the fence, and if we miss, I'll be sad. But I still believe we made the right decision in combining these two other things.
Okay, and now I'm gonna look really stupid, but who are you? I'm just curious.
I'm an ex-council member.
Okay.
I'm the current mayor.
You're the mayor? Oh! Okay, you're Rod or something, right?
Or something.
I would like
A lot of things, and I can now add shady.
And on the shady
I didn't
note,
say you were shady.
I would like to
Lights
mention
have
too.
now come on.
What do you
Question,
plan on doing
question.
It's
with-
funny.
once the police station built or whatever? What are they gonna do with that
It's still a
building?
city structure, still an city-owned
city-
structure.
So will the city sell that then?
I don't
We
think
have to
that's the way.
explore those options. I don't have a plan, I'm sorry, I can't.
I was just
there's no
wondering if-
plan.
I'd like to mention too, just from the social media standpoint that's been brought up, they've asked about putting this PowerPoint up for a couple weeks ago, and I suggested not to, until after this meeting, due to the fact everybody makes their own assumptions, and it just builds this fire that everybody's coming in here upset about. It's kinda sad, really, that we've had, 20 at the last meeting, and maybe 16 or 20 here, to be informed properly. I'm not trying to sway people which way to vote, I'm just saying, the facts are here. I'm gonna send this PowerPoint over to Jacob to put it on the website tomorrow, but people make their own assumptions, and like they said, let the experts show you the numbers, I mean, the tax numbers, all of that, and vote by that. But I also do not pay taxes in town, I'm from town, but
Yeah,
I live in the county. But, like I said, you gotta just try to keep people from making their own assumptions, because.
Well, that's why I was asking a bunch of questions.
No, and that's fine, I'm just saying, you know how Facebook
Yeah.
and everything spreads like wildfire, and pretty soon,
Yeah.
one person posts something, and then the next, and.
I mean, in all honesty, the only thing I was mad about was when I thought that the votes got snaggled in together. That was the only thing I was mad about, the rest I just wanted to understand.
Right.
But,
I
So
do
all of
think
this
a lot of people think, though, that
I
the
think
city
so.
currently owns that building. That may be something you want to get out there, that there's a way
So I was
to.
taking notes of all the questions that were asked tonight, and the responses, so that'll be posted as well. I'm gonna get that
Mhm.
over to them from the last meeting and this meeting as well, so that people understand that, so.
but I hope you can understand, like, when you're hearing out there, and we're in a small community, like, I'm from Madison normally, these small town things, they're just crazy. But, you know, it just, it flies like wildfire, and all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, this person that I like seems to be being shady to me, and, but I mean, really, that's what you think.
I was really shocked.
I was mad at
We had a
you.
resident last meeting brought up though, if you look at the average, from the average assessment, which obviously it's gonna vary person to person, that she had made the comment of what this is gonna cost you, like 2 Starbucks coffees a month.
Yeah, no, I don't think that the
10:30,
price
10:30.
itself is
Yeah, I'm
costing
just-
that much. It was just the fact of what we were hearing, or what I was
Right.
hearing.
Well, it just reiterates,
Yeah.
if you want the answers, go to the man or the woman that can give them to you.
Right. Well, that's why I'm here, I didn't know
Social media
you.
is not that thing. The talk on the street corner, I'm not saying you may not get correct information, but I'll bet on the come line and make it, and that come line is Jacob's office or Chief. That's where you'll get the correct information.
And I just want to say, we have public meetings, having people come in that are hearing that,
Yeah.
that's important. Because you've heard that, there's people out there now, hopefully you've got some information to go back and share with people. But that's what we try to do, is to answer those questions.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's a shocker to you to think that I have a big mouth, so I would have no problems telling people what it really is.
Please do.
You know, and I won't have a problem with that. But before I was like, okay, I gotta come here because something.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
You
Because you
know.
represent a lot of people out there that are thinking those same things.
Yeah, I kinda speak.
Yep.
We're gonna get the resources put online. We have plenty of handouts in the back. If there are people that you know didn't attend tonight, if you wanna share with them, go ahead and take some. Again, if there aren't any other questions, we'll wrap it up.
No, but I feel